this time me, always worried about technical issues. I'm going to try to watch the chat best I can, y'all, and just keep up as long as I can. Just a reminder, and this is also to cut up for the audio version, the podcast version. Josh is out this week. It is just College Football Nerd, just me, and I'm going to try to carry it as well as I can. If you see the screen go blank, it's probably because I had to go pee or something. So let's get it going. First things first, Biscuit is asking about that quality Auburn performance. So I guess we can go ahead and talk about it. That was awful. And look, I know that sometimes there's an issue with, you had a really tough game and the week after is just, you're kind of going through the motions. We've seen that across the board. We've seen it for years. It's pretty common. But what we saw from Auburn today was pretty terrible. And Bo Nix getting benched is really scary for that Auburn team that needs some consistency at quarterback. Really cool miracle play at the end to get it there on 4th and 9. But man, if you're an Auburn fan, you got to be a little concerned. And this is one where Josh and I will take a little bit of a victory lap and to tell Ohio State fans, don't read too much into that Akron game today, that offensive performance, because look, Akron and Alabama State were the teams that Auburn opened up with and put up 62 and 60 or whatever on. Man, that we learned nothing from that. And as much as it might be a sleepwalk game for Auburn, that's a little scary for me if I'm an Auburn fan. Just checking out. Bruce is already in the chat. Thoughts on Iowa? Iowa scares me a little bit too in terms of where we have them ranked. It's tough because we saw this all year, and we talked about how concerned we were with that Iowa offense. But and y'all, this is going to be a little clunky for me tonight because I'm going to be having to research and look at things while I'm talking to y'all. But again, defense showed up, but I'm concerned about those 24 points and trailing at one point to Colorado State. And Iowa was really why I asked the question on Twitter. Would you, and y'all let me know in the chat, would you rather be a team that's decent on both sides of the ball, but not great, or elite on one side of the ball and bad on the other? And that's what Iowa is the opposite of the same but opposite of 2018 Oklahoma in that, gosh, that is a scary, scary side of the ball on both sides, in good and bad. Iowa's going to lose a game they should. They almost lost today. They could have lost. And Lawrence says something in the water today. It's been something in the water all year. It's a lot of fun. It's tough for people like me that are doing what I do because it's really hard to pick these games knowing that there's no consistency week to week. And, we don't do the one game transitive property thing. We try to do a pattern thing. And when there's a pattern, things are scary and things might, lend one way. But this year, it almost doesn't even matter. And I'm going to get into Notre Dame here in a little bit because Notre Dame fans were all over us because we picked Wisconsin to win that game, all over us on Twitter. But look, I can get into it now. Notre Dame was trailing that game in the fourth quarter. And they obviously got a comfortable win in the end, and it looks good in the score and maybe not even in the box score. There's still a lot of concerns coming out of that game for Notre Dame, a whole lot. They scored 20 offensive points. Their longest scoring drive was 51 yards. So, and they were all of their points were aided by turnover if you count the turnover on downs on their first score. All of their points were aided by turnover. And look, that credit to their defense, but also you have to admit that Wisconsin offense is one of the worst offenses y'all have ever seen. Tell me in the chat, can you remember an offense worse than this offense that we see? Like Mertz is terrible. Slow to process things, slow to do anything with the ball. So yes, Notre Dame won 41-13 or whatever it was, but it was all because of like what their defense did well and what the offense on the other side of the ball did really poorly. So, but all that to say, Notre Dame is not a normal top 10 football team. But this year they might be a top 5 football team, because it's like, if you keep winning ugly and actually winning, then you're not Clemson, right? Because Clemson was winning ugly against Georgia Tech, and now they can't even win ugly against unranked teams. So this year, and this is why I'm like not even that tough on Auburn right now. This year, getting a win, even if it's Georgia State, is a win. And week to week with all the crazy that's going on, who knows? Somebody said, and J-Talk said that Mertz was awful. Nobody on this show, and I don't think a lot of people in our comments, other than maybe Wisconsin fans, thought he was great based on what we saw last year. But A&M's offense was bad today, David, but they didn't turn the ball. They didn't have 4 interceptions and 2 fumbles. So if Wisconsin would have done just what A&M did, like be incompetent and punt, that's like a 13-17 kind of ball game, right? Like, I mean, we're talking about Arkansas and where they're going to go in the polls. Arkansas, and Josh and I both covered on that game against the spread. I picked A&M close to win that game. We both really didn't know how to pick that game, and Josh picked Arkansas to win close. I think the other side, and I actually picked Arkansas, and then we re-recorded and I went with A&M, mostly because I thought that Calzada was going to improve even more week to week. But when you don't have time against a 3-man front, when they're dropping 8, then even if you're a really good quarterback, that's a tough situation. Arkansas probably goes to 6, but Hunter, do you really think they're the 6th best team in the country? Like that is the question. It's like, I've still got some concerns, and I know, when your quarterback gets hurt in the third quarter, that's tough, and it's great that you still hang on to the win. Notre Dame had to go with their 3rd string quarterback. But Arkansas had 2 explosive plays, 1 play with the worst tackling attempt I've ever seen in my life, that were great plays, and they get credit for those. But the entire rest of the game, they had 6 points, and they had a lot of possession. So you got to think about this. Like, not only did they just have 6 points, they had 6 points when the other offense was completely inept, which means they had a whole lot of opportunities even before the injury. So that's something to consider. Joe Murray's world, there are not 25 teams worth ranking at all. Georgia game will tell us how good Arkansas is. That's a tough matchup for Arkansas, especially if, Jefferson wasn't able to run. I don't know. Somebody tell me in the chat, what did they come out with? What actually was a knee, an ankle? What happened there? If he can't run the ball against Georgia, they're screwed. They're absolutely screwed. So somebody, we got a super chat, and obviously that's awesome. Thank you so much for that. Darius says, does Georgia still want brownie points for the Clemson game? Yeah. I mean, Clemson's not a great football team, but who is? Clemson still has an elite something on one side of the ball, right? I mean, for all of their struggles today, their defense did their job. Their defense gave up 14 points total in regulation. Clemson, and then in opening the year, you don't have tape on a team and all that. Like, that's still a good win for Georgia, any way you slice it. Right now, though, like, what happened today, everybody was really impressed with what happened today. This is one of the worst Vandy teams in my lifetime. I'm 41 years old. That's terrible. And the same thing with Alabama blowing out Southern Miss. I watched some of that game as much as I could. Southern Miss is awful. They lost to Troy 21-0 last week. So Mike said Jefferson had a good run near the end. Did they say what it was, like what the injury was? I'm going to try to keep up with the chat. Bruce, Texas A&M is not a top 5 team, especially until they get that offense figured out. And they've got some really good skill players. Spiller and Anaya Smith are really good. Spiller had that great run today, but they don't have an offensive line. And that's something that we didn't touch on in our preview, and I hate that we didn't. And that's something that was really a whiff on my part. And having watched a lot of A&M, I'm trying to fight back a sneeze. Thanks, Pedro. I can't believe we didn't spend more time looking at and considering how bad that offensive line was, given that Arkansas has been getting it. I will say this, and somebody said Texas looked pretty good today. I said in the comments, somebody asked if we're going to do Texas Tech preview, and I said no. Texas is going to murder them. Tech is bad this year. Like, they're bad for Texas Tech. Really, really concerning. Top 4 all SEC, Georgia, Bama, Ole Miss, and Arkansas. I don't know about that. I mean, we'll find out a lot about all 4 of those teams next week, right? I think this year is going to be a war of attrition. It's going to be, it's hard for me to see a path for. I mean, I say that for an ACC champion, but like, Boston College is still undefeated, and Clemson in the past has been really good, but there has been an ACC in the past that could have had a mediocre team go 11-1 or 12-1, right? And so we might see that this year. What do we do with the Big Ten? Like, that's a valid question. It's still, honestly, until proven otherwise, it's going to be Ohio State, but we've seen them struggle. So if Ohio State drops another one but wins the Big Ten, do we put them in the playoffs? I don't know, right? But, like, here's the thing about Alabama and Georgia. We see them murder really bad teams and think they're great, but maybe they're not. Maybe they're beatable too. Let's see, what's Florida doing right now? It's 31-14 last time I looked. Still 31-14. That one's going to wind down. Michigan State losing to Nebraska. Nebraska, and this is another one. Like, how does Nebraska lose that game to Illinois? And what does that tell us about the Big Ten? I mean, it's so tough right now. I think Oklahoma State is underrated. I do. I like them at quarterback. Spencer Sanders is a good quarterback. I think West Virginia is underrated as well. Which means Maryland's probably better than they're getting credit for. North Carolina getting ranked this week and then immediately getting dumped on by Georgia Tech is hilarious. So y'all let me know where you want to go with this. UGA is a pretender. No, they're not. Get out of here. BC and Wake are 4-0. ACC commissioner tomorrow. Yeah. The thing is, Wake might actually be good. I think BC is decent. I'm not totally sold on BC because I'm not sold on Missouri, and that was an overtime game. But right now, like we just said, wins are at a premium, right? Wins are at a premium. So Illinois might have been a fluke. Mr. Raptor or Mrs. Raptor. It might have been a fluke, but you can't come out of the gate, with a dud like that. I love Neil Brown. I love Bill Smith. I love some of these guys that are kind of in that middle tier of kind of up and coming. Chili Davis, yes. Auburn may not be trash, but they're like, it shows you where Auburn is in that an Auburn of a few years ago could have a sleepwalk first half and then turn it on in the second half and win something like 34-14. And I know it was 34-24, but that game, for all intents and purposes, was an Auburn loss until a prayer. Mike, thanks for the super chat. Jefferson said it's not a serious injury. It looked weird, but it didn't look like anything bad. Austin, what's more likely, 2 undefeated teams or 4 one for one. There's a lot coming in. I'm having to read. Austin, restate that, and I'll try to look at it again because there's a lot going on there. Spencer Rattler is having a tough year, y'all, and it seems like he's regressed. He had warning signs last year of maybe he would throw down a beautiful throw. He would put a great drive together and then sputter for 3 straight 3-and-outs or something like that and let somebody back in the game. This year, it seems to be a little bit worse than that with what they're doing. But I said this in our show last week, I feel like some of it's coaching. Which is more accurate, PFF college or the AP poll? It's got to be the AP poll. Like we tweeted earlier, like yesterday, PFF, I think, struggles. Their college stuff has reminded me a lot of FPI in that some things make sense and then with their individual player evaluations, and then they'll put stuff out there that's like way wrong, way off the wall. So I think that I'm going with AP poll there. I think the lack of parity in college football and the wild variability really screws with PFF, and they're a lot better for the pro game than they are for the college game. Horatio, why would Corral be the front runner when Bryce has much better stats? Probably because he plays at Ole Miss and doesn't have the weapons around him that Bryce does. They still got Ely, I think, at tailback. They lost a good bit over the last couple of years at wide receiver. The kid at Fresno State, to me, should be in the conversation. And Fresno's a good team, y'all. Is a really good team. Bruce with the super chat, thank you. Rattler is extremely talented, but super overhyped. I think that he's a little bit overhyped. I do. And I think that part of that is it's kind of like what we did with Trevor Lawrence, right? Like he came in anointed. Trevor Lawrence came in anointed, had that 2018 season, and he never lived up to the anointing that he got in his first year. He didn't. So with Rattler, he came in anointed because he's the starter at the QB factory, right? But Jalen Hurts started that year for a reason. And Jalen Hurts didn't have an amazing year. Statistically, he had a pretty good year, but he had some issues, and he still started over Rattler. And Rattler last year was good. But I think everybody expected him to take the next step this year, and he didn't. It's only September 25th, and it's been one hell of a year. That is absolutely right. This year, it's been fun. And I'll tell you, the most fun for me has not been the craziness of the wild losses and Clemson losing today, which was cool to see the fans storm the field and all that. What's been fun for me is that we see a lot of defensive games now. And I just hated that couple of years of football where it felt like whoever had the ball last was going to win. And this year feels like the football that I grew up with, in that a 24-27 kind of game is very likely in a lot of these games that we've seen. And to me, that's just much more fun. Where a punt feels like a turnover in these track meet games, I just hated that. There's so little strategy there. I mean, I know there's a lot of strategy behind scoring all those points, but it's like it just didn't feel like football to me. And this year with the defense has felt a lot better. Let's look and see what's going on in the chat. Who's going to win the Big 12? We were not high on Iowa State coming into the season, and we kind of got killed for it. I'm trying to think if Oklahoma looks like they're going to drop a game or two along the way. West Virginia has an out-of-conference loss. I was hoping that Kansas State was going to be the team. Right now, Oklahoma State looks pretty good. Horatio says that no team this year will equal the last three national champions. No, but they don't have to. And that's the thing. Like each year is its own thing in a vacuum. So 2021 Georgia doesn't have to be better than 2020 Alabama, right? Or Alabama or whomever it is. Though with all of this crazy, it does bring in an opportunity for a Cincinnati to make the playoffs. Do we really think that Notre Dame is going to go undefeated this year? I think they play Cincinnati next week. And that's going to give Cincinnati, if Cincinnati beats Notre Dame this next week, it's going to give them a ranked win, right? But as bad as Wisconsin played today, and they had a 13 to 10 lead in the fourth quarter, if Cincinnati, it's kind of like the Indiana game. Like if Cincinnati can't beat Notre Dame soundly, I have concerns about putting them in the playoffs, but who else we're going to put in there? Brandon came through with the super chat as well. Love the content. Go Irish. Worst offensive line in college football. I would say that Arkansas wrecking Texas A&M's offensive line with a three-man front all day probably would argue against that for them. Is Bryce Young the default Heisman winner? Probably. Mike, it is just me tonight. Sorry about that. Josh is on vacation, and so it is just me trying to hold down a live show on my own. We'll see how well that works. If y'all start asking for him, then it's going to make me feel bad. I'm just kidding. Haven't been a fan of expanding playoffs, but this year feels different. Right now, it looks like 12 teams contend. Yeah, but like what you don't do is, and people will use this year going forward as the benchmark for why we should expand the playoffs, but you don't expand based on the exception. You expand based on the rule. And I don't think that we've ever seen, like we haven't seen a playoffs yet that had 4 teams that belong there. So UConn has to be in any worse debate. Yeah. UConn, I don't think they really care. Like they didn't play last year. New York Times famously awarded them the 2020 national champion, which is its own bit of ridiculousness. And I think it shows. Like, I don't think they're serious about football. I would not be surprised. Like, I think that Edsel already said he's going to retire, and I wouldn't be surprised if that program folds entirely within 4 years. Is Michigan preparing me for a major? So Michigan really disappointed me today. I wanted to see them put the foot down on Rutgers to show that, like, I keep saying Michigan has fooled me so many years, and I've been hoping that Michigan this year was going to show me something that next gear, and it wasn't just because of their competition played so far. But I'm starting to think Edsel has quit after week 2. They are crumbling. Yeah, I mean, I feel like he's already retired a little bit. I would say Akron is up there with one of the worst. Like, Akron UConn would be a good game. I mean, it would be a close game. It would not be in any way a good game. I think 10-2 finish for Ole Miss is probably more likely than Jeff Levy leaving for P5. Like, I mean, both could happen, actually. Both could happen. Let's see. Notre Dame offense was much better with backup. You see that sometimes, though, and they'll flash for a little bit, and then and then because a lot of it is adrenaline and they're coming into the fire. We saw this, 2009 national championship game. Garrett Gilbert came in and was throwing dimes on that Alabama defense after Colt McCoy got hurt. And then so coming into the next season, where I thought he was going to be amazing, and he was trash. I think he ended up transferring. I can't remember. So So I don't know, but Cone has not been great this year. And that Notre Dame offense was not doing anything when he got hurt. They had 10 points, and this Pine's a third string guy for a reason. And I always say that, like, usually the starter is the starter for a reason. Like 2 weeks ago, Florida fans were saying that they needed Emory Jones out of there. But for what Dan Mullen's trying to do with that offense, like, he's the starter for a reason, and they're up 38-14 right now on Tennessee. And I know it's Tennessee, but still, like, the guys come out of camp and they're the starter for a reason. Looks like Michigan State and Nebraska are now tied. This today has been fun. I wonder what's going to happen if Oklahoma loses this game. Like, I don't know what to think about the Big 12. Garrett Gilbert almost won the second string job for the Cowboys because he's a talented kid, or he was at Texas, but he was not great. But what I was saying is, he came in with the adrenaline. Probably a lot of these, when these backup quarterbacks get thrown into a game, the mentality is that we've already lost. So I'm going to just go out there and do whatever. LW, thank you for the super chat. If you got a question you want to throw in there, be happy to follow up with it. Is Gary Patterson losing a step? Maybe. I mean, it's tough to recruit at TCU. So there was 10 years ago, so many of the spread concepts offensively and what he was doing defensively, schematically, were fresh and new and a great equalizer for lesser talented teams. And now everybody's caught up. And so now a lot of those advantages that you had with scheme are now neutralized because people are using the same scheme or defending against those scheme with better players. And so I think for a while, there's a little bit of like arbitrage there. There's a schematic arbitrage where you can be a really good, you can win a lot of games and maybe look like a really good coach, Gus Malzahn, because you have a scheme that is kind of new and people don't really know how to defend it or approach it or prepare for it. And over time, there's enough tape on you, and you kind of regress to the mean. Cone is okay. They have no O-line or running game. I mean, they've got 2 future NFL running backs. They do not have a great quarterback. Let's see. What else we talking about in here? Alabama and Georgia are clearly levels ahead of the rest of the nation. Maybe. I mean, maybe. What do we think? Why, other than the names, and I'm not saying you're wrong, but other than the names, what have we seen them do that we weren't thinking or we hadn't seen as of last week from a Michigan, right? So they won 63-10 over NIU last week. I mean, I feel like if we put Alabama and Georgia's season results under the brand name of an Indiana or an Oklahoma State, nobody is saying they're far and away the best teams in the country. They're going to say, look at who they've played. I have reason to be skeptical. But for Alabama and Georgia, we're not doing that. Let's see. Auburn could be a top 10 team with a good QB. Get out of here. Get out of here. They, for all intents and purposes, lost to Georgia State today. Not even Georgia Southern. They don't have a wide receiver on that team that is good. They're depleted at wide receiver, and Gus Malzahn left that offensive line pretty bare. And their defense is not as good as it's been in the past. It's good. It's still pretty good. It's still kind of fundamentally sound, but it's not as good as it was. It still had it the last few years. Alex, Florida fan, asking, what do I think of Florida? So here's the thing. And I don't remember who I heard talking about it this week, but they made a good point. They were like, you can take a close win or a close loss to Alabama or any good team like that and either let it break you or let it fuel you. And I think Auburn let it break them. That game against Penn State let it break them, and it showed today against a vastly inferior opponent. I don't think Texas is a good or Tennessee is a good team. I don't. But I think they're a good enough team that what Florida did to them tonight, or is doing to them, is really shows me that one, they circled the wagons after the loss, and they've let it fuel them and not break them. Georgia, Florida is going to be an interesting game. Steven, thank you for the super chat. I'm skeptical of UGA, but always am skeptical of every Lamar. Lamar is also very skeptical of his own team a lot of times, but he usually gives really good analysis. I think it's fair, Lamar, to be skeptical of Georgia. I would love for you to chime in on the chat. You don't have to super chat. I'll read it. What you thought about LSU today. Interestingly enough, Mississippi State beat this NC State team that handled Clemson today by 2 touchdowns. So that's weird. I think Max Johnson's decent, Vincent. I don't know that he's very good. I think he's decent. I think if he had, I think he's got good wide receivers to throw to, like more than Bo Nix at Auburn's not a good quarterback for a lot of reasons, but he doesn't have anybody to throw to. Max Johnson does. They both have bad offensive lines. But on the flip side, Tank Bigsby's a better running back than anything that LSU's got. I think Max Johnson's decent. I don't think he's great. Florida did look shaky in the first half, but one of those touchdowns was just a bomb. Like, I will say that 4th and 5 man beater drag that got dropped for Tennessee when the game was still in question was a backbreaker, because he could have scored on that. Ridiculous hot take: Auburn will win out the SEC, beat Georgia twice, beat Alabama twice. This is nonsense. I won't stand for trolling on my channel. I'm not even tipsy yet, so I can't entertain that. By the way, I don't think y'all asked yet. This is a Zaka Singularity. It's a stupid name from Trim Tab. It's excellent. All their stuff is excellent. Ed Orgeron is a glorified cheerleader. We took a tremendous amount of heat when Ed Orgeron got hired full time. When he got hired at LSU, we did this whole video on how we don't think he's a great coach. We don't think he's got the administrative side of things down, and it's really scary for us if we're thinking about, LSU's future. And people circle back and kind of threw that in our face when we won a national championship. And I softened a little bit. To Josh's credit, he didn't. He held pretty firm. Now, he also held firm this week on his statements that he made in the Arkansas preview. I don't know that I'm even going to address those. But he stood firm on the Orgeron thing, and I think it was good. Like, I think he was right. Like, Ed Orgeron's not a good coach. There's too much talent on that team for them to be kind of bored, and for them to kind of also sleepwalk through some of these games. Thank you, Alberto, for all the Notre Dame fans that are killing us. You actually gave us some credit there, and the ending was fluky. I still think that Notre Dame was the better team. I just don't think that final score really shows what's going on. Can the SEC get 3 teams in the playoffs this year? I think there's, and I'm going to get accused of being a homer here. I think there's a legitimate argument that the SEC at the end of the year might have 3 of the 4 best teams in the country, depending on whether or not Ole Miss shows that they have an offense. I think Arkansas is a good story, and I love what they did with in the Texas game. I think they're one of those good to okay teams on both sides of the ball. They're better on defense than they are on offense, I just don't think that they're going to be one of the teams. But I do love what Sam Pittman's doing over there. Sam Pittman, like, I can't believe that he was the Georgia offensive line coach and not, I mean, he's done such a great job. I imagine somebody's going to try to pick him up. Could y'all see, let me know in the chat, could you see Sam Pittman at USC or maybe LSU? Lamar says that Ed Orgeron, let me get it right. Ed Orgeron will be 52-21 when he leaves LSU. He's 2-0 versus Georgia, 3-1 versus Mullen. He's not a great coach, but also wrong to dunk on him. I mean, look, that's just where we're going to disagree, because LSU doesn't have an 8-4 type standard. They don't. And last year there were a lot of injuries and opt-outs and replacing a lot of guys, but last year was, to me, inexcusable. And I will say he's probably 2-2 versus Mullen if Mullen doesn't sit Pitts last year and actually cared about that game. But I also said, which you disagreed with me last week when you were talking about selling your soul for 2019. He got the hardware. So I think irrespective of all the other stuff he's done, he brought some hardware to Red Stick. So that's great. Bruce Rivers with the super chat. UGA has to beat Bama for me to believe the hype. I mean, okay, but the hype is relative. Like, they have to – I'm just watching this snap mishandle. Looks like West Virginia's they're trying to get Oklahoma a win tonight. It's relative to what? Like, the hype, believe the hype, what? That they're an elite team or that they're a national championship team? Like, yeah, everybody that wants to say they're the best team in the country has to beat Alabama, but that doesn't mean that Georgia hasn't earned the hype, because what I'm seeing from everybody else, from Clemson and Ohio State and Notre Dame, like, relative to the 129 of 130 teams, I'm seeing that the hype is real. Someone said that we are Auburn fans. I mean, Auburn fans hate us, so I don't know where that came from. We also get accused weekly of being Ohio State fans. Nobody's going to accuse us of being Clemson or Notre Dame fans. With a win next week, can Cincinnati make the playoffs? I think they might make the playoffs, possibly because of how bad everybody else this year. But I also wouldn't be surprised if they win next week and lose to someone random. Gage, glad you're here. Odom is probably getting hired first. Odom might, after his, like, and look, I don't think I don't love the end of the job he did at Missouri, but some people are just better coordinators. They just are. I think Venables might be that kind of. I think Venables might be kind of guy. If Brian Kelly was in the SEC all these years, does he win it all? Yeah, Brian Kelly's a good coach. I mean, people look at Notre Dame and see that they're not good enough to beat Alabama. This is the 2019 Texas A&M thing all over again. Just because you're not good enough to beat the best team in the country does not mean you're not a good football team. It just means you happen to have played the best team in the country while other people had the luxury of not playing the best team in the country. Brian Kelly has to work within academic restrictions while not being known as a team that has academic restrictions like Northwestern, like Vanderbilt. So there are actual limitations that Notre Dame can't recruit every single player that Alabama or Ohio State can recruit. And so he is at a significant disadvantage. I think he wins above his coaching record, and their schedule is tough. Like, they don't recently haven't been playing like a lot of elite teams, but it's not their fault, and it's not for lack of scheduling. It's a tough deal to play 8 named programs that you've heard of out of 12 games. Some of those are really big names that do recruit really well. It's a tough thing to win 10 games of that schedule year in and year out. Absolutely, he would win in the SEC. Let's see. You think Jerry Jones opens up the purse to keep him at Arkansas? Maybe. The love that the Arkansas fans have for him right now is unmatched anywhere in college football, including in Tuscaloosa. Like, because they were dying for something to cheer for, and he's given them a whole season of something to cheer for. Let's see. Y'all coming through with the chat, and it's great. Given it's really helping me actually to have things to talk about. A&M was overhyped. Admit it. I mean, yes, maybe they're overhyped, but relative to what? Because Iowa had to fight and claw to beat Colorado State today. Clemson lost to NC State today. So again, you can say someone's bad or undeserving of where they are, but relative to what? Now, I think A&M's got some real problems offensively, but where they couldn't beat an Arkansas, could they beat a team that doesn't play defense? Like they could lose to Arkansas and turn around and beat Ole Miss. Like, so maybe they're overhyped, but it's relative to what? You always got to put that in there. David asked, what fan base dislikes us the most? It's got to be Clemson. It's got to be Clemson. And a lot of Clemson fans will agree with us on this take. Clemson fans are – Josh might kill me for saying this, and maybe this gets cut up and played elsewhere, but Clemson fans in a lot of ways are new money fans. They haven't been historically great. They have a younger fan base, and a lot of them only really know being really good. And so they don't like to hear our criticism of elite teams because we hold you to a certain standard if you're elite. So we could spend 20 minutes doing a show about Clemson and talking about how great they are. And then I'll say, Josh, what's the one place you want to stress this Clemson team? And he'll say, their linebackers. And we'll spend 20 minutes talking about how great they are. All we'll hear in the comments is how we just trash Clemson, hate Clemson, because we said that they might have a weakness at linebacker. They don't want to hear it. And so that's the team fan base that absolutely hates us the most. And it's too bad because we love doing Clemson content. They got a great team. Well, maybe not this year, but Notre Dame fans also, we used to do really, really well with Notre Dame fans. And then over the years, we kind of fell out of favor with them because we really we're on the forefront of the whole concept of the canary in the coal mine regarding if you are struggling with multiple mediocre teams and winning and have a clean win-loss record, things churn quickly in the playoffs. And that just because you're 12-0 does not mean you're a playoff team. And they really, like, when we kind of got on that bandwagon, they stopped watching us. Brian Glaze in the house, y'all. He puts out great content, bit of a Bama homer, but he breaks down stuff really well. Check him out, Brian Glaze, on YouTube. We are major UCF homers. That's right. That's the fan base that hates us the most, but it's entirely because of me on Twitter. I do not miss an opportunity to get in with their 7 fans on Twitter and explain to them how they're wrong. Brian Cornelius, thank you for the super chat. What is your opinion on Harsin? The roster is pretty bare. Do you see potential success? So I don't love the hire, but I love it more than what I think they were originally planning, which was this weird coup with Kevin Steele, which would have been an absolute disaster because ain't nobody coming to Auburn to play for Kevin Steele. Recruiting would have been impossible. Culture fit, I'm not sure about Harsin. We'll see. But I haven't seen anything so far that makes me say he's a bust, because Auburn, I didn't expect Auburn to be good this year. And you're right. They left the cupboard bare. I don't know that any Auburn fan, like, they got to be happy with last week. They do. I mean, even in the loss, Auburn played well. They fought. It was good. It's like Oklahoma's going to win this game. Today sucked, but I mean, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say it was just a huge hangover from that Penn State game, and they still won. He's going to have the same problem. Recruiting's going to be tough, because now what Sam Pittman's doing, culture-wise and engagement-wise and actually winning-wise, he's going to gobble up a lot of those recruits that aren't going to Georgia and Alabama in the SEC. So I'll say this about Harsin. If he's going to make a move and solidify himself at Auburn, he's got to do it before Oklahoma and Texas get any kind of traction in the SEC. We're trending towards Wake Forest and Pitt in the ACC championship game. And what's funny about that is, in a lot of these, we've got a lot of good data points this year. This is been one of the best years for out-of-conference great data points. I mean, we're in week 4, and we got an SEC team playing an ACC team, and that's awesome. But Pitt, I think they played a pretty close game with Tennessee. I don't remember now. I remember how bad Joe Milton was in that game, but I don't remember if Tennessee came back on them or what. I know they jumped out on them, but now my memory, and now y'all know that I'm not a Tennessee fan. To be fair, you did say if Notre Dame runs a table with their schedule, they definitely deserve to be in the playoffs. Yeah, this year Notre Dame's schedule, and we did a preview on that and said, look, this schedule is not set up for them to be successful, especially in a kind of rebuilding year. If Notre Dame, I would say this year, what we've seen so far, if they do like 11-1, I might consider them in the playoffs. We've got to do this thing. And somebody said earlier that whoever is champion this year won't touch the last 3 champions. We've got to put out of our mind what we've seen in years past and understand that this is a 2007 type year. There are going to be teams in the playoffs that have very large, possibly fatal warts. And we have to accept that and understand that just because they're not as good as maybe the second or third best playoff team from 2 years ago, that doesn't mean they don't deserve or belong in the playoffs this year. We've got to separate that. We got to separate that. You know who else is doing really good culture-wise and maybe not winning a lot of games? Shane Beamer. What he's doing at South Carolina is, I think, really good. Now, it's going to be a tough place to recruit, but that's a live fan base. If he can get them engaged, he might do something well there. And we're also forgetting what NIL might do to the recruiting opportunities for some of these teams who have struggled for a while and maybe fell back a little bit. And that's where I think teams like maybe Clemson or some of the really good G5s in the past might struggle a little bit in the future NIL world. But if we're going just on like endowments, and Vanderbilt's going to be the best team in the SEC soon. Sean, thank you so much for the super chat. Alabama will always love you. Josh has never picked Alabama. I don't know that he has or has not. I don't remember if he's ever. You know what, Horatio? He may not have. I have picked Alabama to lose. I picked them to lose 2019 Iron Bowl, and I'm pretty proud of getting that one right. I also believe that I picked them to lose 2018 versus Clemson. I don't remember. But that doesn't necessarily mean Josh has a blind spot for Alabama, or that like a lot, like our channel used to be SEC fans, and a lot of people joke about SEC riding Alabama coattails. Alabama's just been that good. Like since we started this show, Alabama's just been that good. And this is how I know that people don't understand when they say ESPN is just up SEC's ass and all this. Like, it would be so good for our channel and our numbers if Alabama wasn't good. If Ohio State and Texas and Notre Dame and Michigan were the top 4 teams in the country, that would be so much better for our channel. And it's the same thing for ESPN because they have contracts with the Big Ten. They have contracts with the Big 12. So they would much rather a team in the biggest city in Ohio that has a rabid fan base do really well than a team in Oxford, Mississippi. So I always laugh when I see people being like, oh, they're just, they're kissing the SEC's ass. No, they don't. They would much rather the Big Ten be better. Let's see. Everybody's having offensive line issues this year. Can you attempt to name a top 5 of Big Ten teams, i.e. who wins on a neutral field? Yeah, I can try. Ohio State, Michigan, still Iowa, Maryland, Penn State. Probably in that order. And people are going to raise their eyebrows about the Penn State thing. But look, there are so many warning bells right now about Penn State, given what we've seen Wisconsin and Auburn do outside of that game against Penn State or their game against Penn State. We know, like everybody wants to give Penn State a lot of credit in the rankings for their wins over Auburn, their ranked wins over Auburn and Wisconsin. But to me, what those 2 data points have shown is that Josh is actually messaging me on Slack. I don't know if he's listening or what. To me, what these have shown is these 2 games is that they're about as good as Wisconsin and Auburn, which means they're not a top 10 team. So take that for whatever it's worth. I think we're too quick to credit ranked wins when they're ranked in July. And like, is Wisconsin a top 25 team? They've got a bottom 10 offense. That Wisconsin. If I'm a Wisconsin fan, I am furious with the coaching staff and how. I mean, that Wisconsin offense was so basic, like so unbelievably basic. I mean, I tweeted about it. Like out of the first 30 pass attempts, 27 of them were play action passes. Like, can you not run something a little more creative than play action pass levels tight end concept? Really? Because that's all they did. They roll with a slow ass guy out there to throw in the flats, and it was just not successful. Stevens, thank you for the super chat. You burning more money here, so I appreciate that. You lost some money on the Badgers. Look, I thought that I think my thought on Wisconsin Notre Dame was a little bit of me thinking highly of Penn State in a way that I shouldn't have. And really, I still have a lot of concerns with Notre Dame. Florida State should hire Kiffin. Kiffin's got a better job right now at Ole Miss than Florida State. Florida State also doesn't have any money. They don't have enough money to fire who they got. If Kiffin goes anywhere, ironically, the best job for Kiffin right now is Southern Cal, but ironically, any chance you would ever rank Coastal Carolina in the top 10? I mean, if they were good enough, but didn't they give up like 30 points to Buffalo last week? That's my concern with them is they don't have a great defense. I think they were a better team last year, honestly. Mr. Proud Boy says, remember the Mike Shula days? I remember. Must be a Bama fan. Those were lean years for Bama fans, though they did have the 10-win season with the win over Texas Tech in the Cotton Bowl. Let's see here. Guys, I appreciate y'all so much for showing up, even though it's just me talking tonight. I really do appreciate it because I didn't know if we should do this at all. LSU should hire Kiffin. I think that's a better call. I think Lane Kiffin could do really well at LSU. I think he'd be scary at LSU. I wonder if Nick Saban retires in the next couple of years, if Alabama would consider hiring him, because that would be legit scary. If Lane Kiffin could recruit on the level that Alabama is recruiting right now with his system, with his staff that he's got right now, that would be pretty scary. If Norvell doesn't work at FSU, they should go get Deion Sanders. I'm to the point now, like, I don't know that I love that idea because still don't know what to think about Deion Sanders as a head coach. But in terms of a PR move, a recruiting move, it would be awesome. I don't know if they can afford that. Florida run game versus Georgia rush defense. So here's the thing about the Georgia rush defense. Georgia against a straight up run game is the best in college football. Now, what's interesting to me is the same concept and the point that Josh made about why he picked Arkansas against Texas A&M. Texas A&M, great defense, elite defense. The difference between these two offenses was that they had a quarterback that was somewhat mobile. He's more than somewhat mobile. He's very capable. So that could be a good equalizer for Florida against Georgia in something that Georgia really hasn't had to prepare for yet this year. So that is very interesting. Lamar says, why does this season feel so different? 2017 and 2019 teams so unstable week to week. I don't know. I've asked this question at the beginning of our live show like every week. And it's like, is everybody bad or is everybody some level of good? And that way the teams that we have discounted are decent. And I do think that there is a lot of democratization of schemes and tape and all these coaching camps and clinics, and the information's out there. So everybody's working with the same thing. Strength and conditioning programs have all kind of leveled off. So unless you have like a significant talent advantage, I do think that there is some parity. Now, it's not consistent because it's hard to sustain that and maintain that week to week. But Lamar, it feels wild in a good way this year. I don't want this every year, but I'm liking it this year. Hasn't Dabo always wanted to go to Bama? I feel like once Dabo had a lot of success at Clemson, some of that sort of went away. I don't know that Alabama would want him now. They're not great right now. Really, where they're not great is that offensive coordinator, and I felt that for some time. Joshua B, TJ Finley revenge game Saturday night Death Valley. That's funny because Auburn fans, I saw it on TV. They were chanting for TJ Finley at the end of that game, and I mean, Bo Nix getting benched. I can't believe it. I cannot believe it, and I could see it. It'll be interesting because he hasn't been getting the reps all off season, so we'll see. Let's see here. Les could bring in the talent. That wasn't the issue. You're right, Mr. Proud Boy. Chili Davis. I'm actually Daniel, so and I'll never tell. Trim Tab does have distribution, though, some, and I am in a network of friends who ship beer all around the country to one another. Let's see. Clemson still runs the Taj Boyd offense. I mean, Clemson's had to adjust their offensive scheme, especially without having ETN. And Josh talked about this a lot in the offseason about how ETN made that offense go a lot more than Trevor Lawrence, and that the combine that with Amari Rodgers, who did a lot for that offense. They're feeling it this year, and they don't have that dump off or design play to ETN that's a 5-yard pass that goes for 50 yards. They don't have that in their offense this year because they don't have the personnel. Do I think Ole Miss beats Alabama this week? Well, you'll obviously have to tune into our preview to find that out. The thing that I know about a lot of these games is that the ones that are billed to be the trap games usually aren't. And Ole Miss last year caught Alabama where Florida caught them this year. And Ole Miss, the one flip side of that, though, is Ole Miss has had the season open with 3 cupcakes and an off week for Alabama. So last year, I know that they had an off week before Alabama, and I think that really showed up on the field. But this game's in Tuscaloosa, I think, and I'm not picking yet, but I mean, I think Ole Miss is an offense. When you have an elite something on one side of the ball, either side of the ball, you got a puncher's chance. So I would not rule them out, especially. Travis Shaw says, "Do we think highly of Napier?" Yes, Neil Brown, Napier, and Bill Smith are like my 3 favorite need to be hired somewhere big coaches in the country. I like him a lot. Adam Gase is a train wreck. I can't name one college program that needs to hire Adam Gase. Who wins the Heisman this year? There's not a clear superstar. Like this, the thing is, like you would think it'd be a year where a running back could win, like a Breece Hall or Bijan Robinson, but nobody's really, like you say, no superstar quarterback, no superstar players really. Like Thibodeau has been out for 3 weeks, starting his own cryptocurrency thing, working on that. And so I don't know about like that's the kind of thing you usually see in a year like this, is like a defensive player really getting some love. Will Anderson right now, I think, is the best player in the country. So there's that, and he ain't going to win the Heisman. Do we have a P.O. box? No, we're getting one though. We're gonna get one soon because I want to fill out this back here with some more stuff. Like all those jerseys are SEC jerseys, and I want to swap some of those out. I did add Sooner Schooner this year, Woody Hayes this year. So we are going to get a P.O. box. I want to do that. And then we're going to get Josh a setup where he's on camera more, and it's not just me for the previews. Let's see. Oklahoma with a horrible showing, number 4, embarrassing. Who do you put ahead of them? So, and that's what we talked about earlier. Like getting wins matters, but this shows like we've got enough information on Oklahoma to know that they are about as good as a bunch of mediocre teams, which is scary. Like Tulane, they're about as good as Tulane. They're maybe a little better than that final score showed. Nebraska last week, Nebraska outplayed them in the box score. I mean, West Virginia had the chance to go up in this game tonight and snapped it past the quarterback. And so they had 3rd and 32. Like, this means that you are about as good as these teams that you're playing. And we saw Oklahoma have brain farts in seasons past, but then they'd come out and murder somebody, and put up 70 on them. And we're just not seeing that this year. What's the chat doing? I don't know that I have Oklahoma in my top 10. Jafari Williams, thank you so much for the super chat. We're happy to have you in the live session. Go Blue, and shout out to the guy that said Clemson wouldn't drop to. Notice the capital L. That's funny. I have not been doing a good job of highlighting the comments because I'm a one-man show tonight. I don't have a fake producer like Josh Pate. Nobody's actually seen producer Colin on camera, so we don't know. Woody Hayes doll, does it attack players? No, it doesn't. It doesn't grab Champ Bailey by the face mask. No. Let's see. So someone says they don't think Alabama loses a game this year. I mean, I could see them losing a game this year. I wouldn't be surprised. I would be surprised if Alabama's not in the playoffs. Cal McCord, look, somebody said McCord is better than Rattler and DJ Uiagalelei. Look, Auburn put up 62 on Akron. They had 12 points with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter against Georgia State today, and that's with a blocked punt touchdown. So hold your horses on what Ohio State did to Akron today, because that's one of the director Colin. Sorry, I think it's producer. And RJ has a producer too. So yeah, not only do I not have Josh here helping me out, I'm having to do this all by myself. Josh's wife is actually kind of a producer because she follows the chat and helps us out. DJ Uiagalelei is way better than y'all think he is, because he has no offensive line, has no wide receivers to throw to. Alabama was losing next week to Ole Miss. Maybe. I mean, it's going to be interesting. That game's going to do. It's interesting because that game and Georgia Arkansas fall on the same week. Auburn LSU is like the fourth undercard, which is wild to me, given those two teams passed. Who do I think has the best chance to make the playoffs after Bama and Georgia? Honestly, it's going to be conference champions, unless we've got a bunch of two-loss conference champions, and that's going to open the door for Cincinnati. A lot will be clearer after next week, because, look, what if Ole Miss beats Alabama? If Ole Miss beats Alabama, then Ole Miss has got to lose 2 times for Alabama to win the West, which is totally a possible Lane Kiffin coach thing to happen, is then to beat Alabama and then lose to Auburn the next week. But that's a huge game for the college football landscape, because Ole Miss, let's say Ole Miss does go undefeated, beats Alabama, and then if they lose to an undefeated Georgia in the SEC championship game, Alabama's out. It's going to be Ole Miss and Georgia in the playoffs. We're not going to see 3 teams, which means, for all intents and purposes, a 1-loss Alabama team, who very well might be the best team in the country, wouldn't even be in the playoffs in a year where we might see a 2-loss conference champion in the playoffs or a G5. So next week, and so also Cincinnati, Notre Dame next week. It's a monster week for getting some clarity on this middle end of the season. Oregon has the most clear path to the playoff, yes, but I'm not sure that they're good enough to – so here's a question for the chat. Okay, if Oregon drops some random game to Arizona State or something this year, but wins the Pac-12, Ole Miss goes 11-1 and loses a close game to Alabama, which one of those 2 teams are you putting in the playoffs? So NBA fan says he's better than Stroud. Stroud didn't get the luxury of starting out with Akron. It's hard to stress how bad Akron is. They're worse than Air. They're worse. So they might be worse than the Vanderbilt team that Georgia was up 35-0 in the first quarter today, or the Southern Miss team that Alabama could have scored 100 on. They might be worse than those 2 teams. So it's impossible to know, because they may as well have been playing Air. Jameson Williams' speed is no joke. If he can get his route running sorted, too many mental lapses. And he's had some mental lapses at Alabama too. He had some drops and stuff. But he is super fast. And I saw that kick return today. Looked pretty good. And thank you for the super chat, Cameron. Kirby is a better coach than Lincoln Riley. I mean, last few years, people have had a lot of gripes about Kirby's offense, and I think they were fair. But better coach than Lincoln Riley right now, I think that's probably safe to say. He's recruited better, which should mean he's got a better team, but also recruiting is part of the game. It's part of what makes you a good coach. People always discount what Nick Saban's done and said, well, he's got all these 5-star players. There's other teams that are recruiting right up there with him that aren't nearly as consistent. So there's something going on there other than just the players. If you recruit well and win 9 games every year and always go to a bowl, like, yes, that's an excuse. You can say, well, you should because you got all these players. If you win 100 straight against unranked opponents, which I think he has done, that's a little different. All that hype about the OU defense, it's because they were practicing against that trash-ass offense all summer. So, I mean, Oklahoma defense has been decent this year. I mean, they gave up 13 tonight. They gave up whatever last week. Mash and Totter said, can we run hypothetical models to compare teams later in the season? We will do some hypotheticals as we get into more fun ones and as we get better data. If Notre Dame goes undefeated this season, are they in playoffs? Yes, because, look, they can win ugly this year and make it in the playoffs because this year isn't previous years, right? I think that we're going to have a lot of 1- and 2-loss champions, conference champions, and Notre Dame, as far as, for better or worse, as far as the playoffs are concerned, Notre Dame is a conference in and of itself. Take that for whatever it is, whatever it's worth. And let's see. Michigan, Wisconsin will tell a lot about Michigan's offense. They do have a good defense. And yes, if Michigan can put up 30 points next week, because keep in mind, Notre Dame scored 20 offensive points this week. They scored 20 offensive points. One came on a field goal on a 4-yard drive. Then they had a 45, 46, and 51-yard drive. They were all turnover rated. So in terms of production, Notre Dame's offense earned about 13 points. So if Michigan can come out and put something up, that'll be interesting. I hate what they did with Rutgers today. I mean, I wanted to see them win that game by 30. I really did. Pac-12 and ACC are pretty much eliminated just about. Maybe who's going to win the Big 12? Who's going to win the Big 12? Who's like – I think that 3 of the 4 best teams in the SEC might be in the SEC, but we can't put 3 SEC teams in a 14 playoff. We just can't. Florida isn't beating Georgia. It won't be close. I mean, we'll see. I think it'll be closer than you think because I don't think Georgia's offense is that great. Maryland is putting up good Big Ten numbers. I think that West Virginia win was a close one, which we'll see. Big 12, SEC, Big 10, and Cincinnati, that's the playoff pool. Possibly. We'll see. Cincinnati's got to beat Notre Dame next week. S&P Plus had UConn as the worst team in the history of college football, which is, I mean, we like S&P, so that's saying a lot. That's crazy. They are terrible. They're absolutely terrible. I got to catch up on the chat, y'all. I'm sorry. I don't know how you like. We're going to try to do a top 10 tomorrow. I don't know how you do one. Sark is 10 times better than Charlie Strong, 5 times better than Herman. We'll see. Y'all know we were really high on that hire, so we'll see if he's 10 times better than Charlie Strong. They put up a lot of points on a really terrible team today, so I'm pumping the brakes a little bit. I'm not killing them that much for getting manhandled by Arkansas. That was a pretty tough scenario for them, but we'll see. Got another super chat from Will C. What about this year is causing this insanity? Obviously, COVID last year, but what is actually happening? We talked about that a little bit. Lamar had the same question, and I don't know. Like, is it the super senior thing? Is it that there's more experience? Is it that all these coaches, like, there's not a lot new under the sun for the first time in a long time. Like, we had a lot of teams running like zone read spread stuff 10 years ago that was coming out of like the G5s and the Big 12. And then Big 12 really was more of an air raid than RPO sort of scheme. And it was giving defenses fits because things were changing so rapidly year to year. You think about those like 08, 09 SEC defenses, Alabama defenses that were really good because they were facing really pro-style offenses at the top level, at the high level. And then when a lot of good teams started adopting some of these concepts, it was stressing defenses in a way. Every year it was something new. So they'd adjust to the Ohio State JT Barrett style zone read offense. They'd adjust to that. And then these RPO spread concepts came out that were a lot different from that in terms of a preparation and personnel, consideration. And then the book was out on some of that. We saw that 2018 Alabama, like the RPO spread, slant, the RPO slant that they lived and died by all year. Take away the big shot play, live between, the 20s, let them have whatever they want, play for the red zone. A lot of this has come out over the last few years, and I think it has equalized the top talent and a lot of the middle talent in terms of parity, to the point where it really is a little bit more about talent. But when it's just about talent and not about scheme, you have a lot of variability. So that's why it's been wild is the book is out on a lot of these offenses, and defenses have finally caught up. I'm a Texas fan. I think we're somewhere between 16 and 22. I think that's fair. Right now, I think that's fair, because what they've done consistently outside of their Arkansas game is look good against bad teams, and we can't say that for a lot of other teams. Let's see. Why aren't Ohio State quarterbacks running the ball? I mean, I think it's got to be a scheme thing. I think it's been coached out of them. And maybe that's what Ryan Day wants. Maybe what he had in Dwayne Haskins is the offense he wants to run. And that's just how it's going to be. We've seen this with Dan Mullen in the opposite way, in that he's very flexible based on personnel. Last year, he was running an offense that he doesn't want to run. Right? He doesn't want to throw the ball 40 times a game. He wants to run what he ran at Mississippi State and what he ran last week against Alabama, which is a lot of QB power, and not a lot of like vertical shot plays. And we saw it again tonight. And so maybe Ryan Day is the opposite of that. Like, he's got a system he wants to run. Maybe he's more like Gus Malzahn. Gus Malzahn was really successful with the QB power stuff in 2013 and with Cam Newton when he was offensive coordinator. But he always went back to what he gravitated towards was a pass-first spread offense, and it didn't work out for him. I hope that's not the case for Ryan Day. I hope he's more flexible, because I'm really wanting him to succeed, and not just to prove me right, but for other reasons. Let's see. Someone else asked, Trim Tab is a Birmingham brewery. Do I live there? I've already answered that question. I do think transfer portal has some to do with it. My concern long-term with transfer portal, especially with NIL, is that the rich are going to benefit the most. But giving players a little bit of freedom and flexibility may have brought in some more parity and some more craziness. Let's see. Urban at USC changes college football. I don't know. I don't know about that. Someone got on to me for comparing Ryan Day to Gus Malzahn. I'm not really comparing them in that way, or in general, just specifically that they might have a scheme that they want to run and are less willing to be flexible with it. Let's see. So Pate Hit says that they're not saying Georgia isn't good, but they haven't seen anything impressive. Again, we got to be relative to the rest of the country because Georgia's out here murdering people, and we got an Oklahoma team who had to fight for their life to beat West Virginia 16-13. We got Auburn, who almost lost to Georgia State today, should have lost to Georgia State today, who gave Penn State all they wanted last week. You know, we got Clemson losing to NC State, who couldn't get within 2 touchdowns of Mississippi State. So not impressed relative to what? Because Iowa almost lost to Colorado State today. So tell me a handful of teams that have been impressive in a way that Georgia hasn't. I don't think you can. And are we really going to say if Georgia had Penn State's schedule where they had 2 quote-unquote ranked teams in Wisconsin and Auburn on it that Georgia wouldn't have done better than Penn State? I think they would have. Georgia is absolutely legit. Their defense is insane. I'm not as sold on their offense, which gives me a little bit of pause if they played Alabama tomorrow. I'm still not that sold on their offense, but they're legit. Let's see. And I am fading a little bit because this has been me talking for an hour and a half. So I probably don't have too much more in the tank, but I'm going to try to go as long as I can for sure. Isn't that always the case, though? Let's see. Can we talk a little bit about North? So somebody said Carolina can get blown out by a team called Georgia Tech. Yeah, like that's the thing is like what Georgia has done to me is impressive. What Alabama has done is impressive. I would have said the same thing about Iowa until this week. So it's like every single team except for Alabama and Georgia. Because even I think Michigan Rutgers was 20-13. Y'all help me in the chat. I think it was 20-13. So it's like all these teams that we want to put up in the top all have these real fatal flaws or have had these real brain fart kind of games, and Alabama and Georgia to this point have not. Let's see. What do I think about the Nebraska defense? I think that, to me, and I might be proven wrong with this, to me, Scott Frost is Frank Beamer at Virginia Tech, where Beamer sucked when he first got there. And I think they were like 4-8 and then like 5-6. There's something terrible, and that math doesn't work out, but they were terrible for a while, mediocre. And he said towards the end of his career, after he had a great career at Virginia Tech, he said, I wouldn't have been successful in modern football because we don't give coaches long enough to be good. Virginia Tech gave me long enough to be good, and then I was good, and I built something there. I think Nebraska is in a position where if they let Frost build something there, they might be good. I think they're woefully inadequate right now at quarterback and offense in general. But I like how their defense is playing this year. Certainly better, much improvement 2 years in a row, I think. 10-3 over Clemson might count as a brain fart at this point. I don't agree with that because Clemson has an elite defensive unit. He is. So everybody's on McCord, and just for the audio side of things, for people who are maybe not following along, Ohio State played Akron today. C.J. Stroud didn't play, and McCord had a great day, and they scored a bunch of points. And so a lot of people are saying, like, it's clear that McCord should be the starter. That's an overreaction to me for 2 reasons. One, Akron is awful, absolutely awful. They're one of the top 5 worst teams in the country. They're terrible. Ohio State could have put me at quarterback. I got a decent arm, but Ohio State could have put me at quarterback and put up at least 35. The other thing is Ryan Day is in practice, in fall camp, in spring practice. He knows these quarterbacks, right? So usually the guy that comes out of fall camp is the better quarterback, and I trust his judgment in that regard. Himanshu S. Apologies if I messed up your name there. Thank you for the super chat. I don't know what my answer was to, but follow-up thoughts on the Ohio State quarterback carousel. And that's what I was just talking about. I think Stroud is actually better than he's getting credit for. I think he opened up in a tough environment. That's a tough, even though Minnesota's not great defensively, they got a pretty good football team, and that's a tough start to be your first start. And then he's got Oregon, right? But he put up enough offense to beat Oregon that the defense let Ohio State down. So I think Stroud is the guy. We'll see. But based on what I've seen, I think they can make a little bit of adjustments in terms of the type of game they're calling for him. They're putting too much on his shoulders. They need to get a running game going when he's in the game, and I think that'll change a lot of things. Javari, thank you again for the super chat. You really don't have to do the big super chats, but they're certainly appreciated. You predicted Bama, Georgia, Ohio State, and Oklahoma making it in the playoffs. It's pretty shaky. Look, I mean, it's not this year. All those are still in play, even if Oklahoma drops a game, because who else is going to be in there? I think that Oregon very well may drop a game or two. We'll know next week if Cincinnati is eliminated. We'll know next week if Notre Dame. And that's what's kind of good for college football. If you hate the idea of too many of these teams stealing a P5 auto bid, Cincinnati and Notre Dame playing one another eliminates the other from being able to do that. So I think that's pretty good. Killtack with the super chat. Thank you so much. Took Arkansas because y'all seem strong about Arkansas and down on Texas. Thanks. Also, I need that Ole Miss Bama video this week. Ole Miss Bama will drop on Monday. Unless something crazy happens, it'll drop on Monday because that's going to be a monster video for our numbers. I think Georgia Arkansas will be as well. Cincinnati, Notre Dame might be too. Notre Dame fans might just want to come back and tell us to eat crow, although I'm not going to do it. Notre Dame's not a top 10 team this year. They're not. I will die on that hill. Even if they go undefeated, I can make an argument for them deserving to be in the playoffs while still not being a top 10 team in the country, which may sound silly. But I'm going to die on that hill. 16 Bond-Hearted 2Ds says, go blue, love the content, keep it up. We're excited about Michigan winning some ball games. I wanted to see them hammer Rutgers today. Although I will say, people are thinking Rutgers of old. Rutgers is a better team this year than they have been in the past. They are borderline decent, but I needed Michigan to win that game by a couple of touchdowns. I'm excited about Michigan being back because we did really well with Michigan fans. We had a lot of fun with those videos leading up to I think it was 2018 that we did really well with them. College football is better when Michigan and Ohio State have a legitimate rivalry, and I just think they are. Let's see. Bama, Georgia, Florida are the three best teams in the nation. Could you see all three making the playoffs? I actually think that I like Florida. I love what they did last week against Alabama. I love that they gave them a game. I moved them way up in my top 10. The style of play for Florida concerns me a little bit offensively. I think a team like Ole Miss might give Florida fits. We'll see. They had a good favorable matchup for Alabama, especially since they got to hide. They nerfed their entire offense first 2 weeks. So I don't know. I don't think Florida's elite. I think they're a top 10 team, though. I think they would beat Notre Dame for sure. And this notion, this is like I'm on this soapbox hard like this last week. Everybody was killing me and Josh for moving Florida up. They're saying you don't reward a loss. But they're saying you don't reward a loss. Clemson barely won this week against Georgia Tech, but they won. Clemson already had a loss. So now at that point, we're rewarding the fact that you lost 2 weeks ago instead of this week. That's asinine. That is absolutely ridiculous. Each week, we get another week of data to add to the entire evaluation of the thing. If you lose, if you're super highly ranked coming out of the summer preseason rankings that are crap, and you lose in week 1, but you only fall a little bit because you're already ranked high, and then Florida loses they did lose too, but Florida loses in week 4 or 3, but they were ranked lower to start the season, which is based on nothing. You don't reward Clemson. Basically, you're saying I'm going to reward you for being ranked higher in the preseason. Well, preseason polls mean nothing. So I don't care if you lost week 1 versus week 3. You're still rewarding a loss if you keep Clemson ahead of Florida. So that's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Thank y'all for tolerating my rant there. Let's see. Big Ten is all Penn State and Ohio State. Penn State's going to lose 2 games this year, at least. You watch. I think I would take Michigan over Penn State right now. This is a good question, and this is going to lead into our preview that we do. How does Ole Miss defense compare to the terrible Ole Miss defense that we saw last year? Lane Kiffin was unhappy with the defense in fall camp. What that means, I don't know. Are they going to be better? They got to be. This is like 2018 Oklahoma. Yes, their defense was better in 2019 and ultimately 2020. They had to be. They statistically literally had to be better because they were that bad. Ole Miss's defense last year was awful. It was absolutely awful. And that's why Indiana, even without Penix in that game, should have beaten Ole Miss just based on how bad that defense was, and they couldn't, which scared me for Indiana coming into this year. I don't know what to think about Ole Miss defense because Alabama's offense is not nearly as good as the one that scored 62 or whatever against Ole Miss last year. Ole Miss's offense might be as good, not quite, but might be close to what they had last year. They're not quite as strong at wide receiver. I don't think Alabama's going to have to score 50 points to win this game. But a vastly improved Ole Miss defense might still give up 40. So Alex says, I don't think Florida should be punished for only being 2 points worse than Bama. I just think it's silly to assume it means they're a top 5 team. I'm not assuming they're a top 5 team. Pause for a drink. I'm not assuming they're a top 5 team, but what are the teams around Florida doing? And the teams that you're going to rank ahead of Florida, are they playing within Alabama, 2 points within Alabama last week? Or are they Iowa, who needed everything they could muster to beat Colorado State today? That's all I'm saying. It's like Florida may not be the 5th best team traditionally if you think of top 5 teams. This year, the top 5 teams all got problems, especially 3 through 5. They all got problems, right? So what Florida did to Tennessee today is somewhat vindicating our rankings, but I'm not also going to overreact too much on them beating a bad Tennessee team. Question: why does the SEC get praised for its variety of good teams, but the Big Ten gets called all bad teams for having multiple undefeated teams and beating each other up? So a lot of this has to do with out-of-conference performance and postseason performance, and some based on, like, I know the meme, right? Like the grind, the SEC grind. There's a lot to it, especially when you're playing when you have to play teams that recruit at a really high level. And we saw that last year. Like Ole Miss was 4-5, or they played 5. They played 10 games. I think they had a losing record, but got into a bowl anyway. But they lost at least like 4 or 5 SEC games last year, and they beat Indiana, who was second in their division, right? And so we see a lot of that out of conference. So it's like, okay, if Ole Miss lost 5 games in the SEC, but is as good as the second best team in the Big Ten, what does it say about the Big Ten? Now, what I will say about that is the SEC can be better than the Big Ten or the ACC, and the SEC champion is not necessarily better than the Big Ten champ or the ACC champ. We saw it in 2018. We saw it in 2014. Like, just because the teams around you aren't as good as teams in another league, or because your schedule isn't as strong, doesn't mean that you're not still the best team in the country. So we have always said that a Clemson or an Ohio State or an Oklahoma could be absolutely deserving the playoffs, even if we're not that high on the teams that they beat, because it's not their fault if other teams aren't very good. Notre Dame is championship caliber everywhere but the offensive line. If they can squeak in, they can develop their O-line. They're not a championship caliber quarterback, and they do not have a championship caliber defensive line. There's a little bit of fool's gold there because they've played they beat Purdue by 2 touchdowns. I think it was like 27-13. They had a come from behind last minute win. There's 1 minute and 6 seconds left on the clock when they threw that touchdown to beat Toledo. They were trailing with 1 minute left in the fourth quarter. You cannot tell me that their only thing they're missing is an offensive line. If that's the case, I'm sorry. Florida State took them to overtime. They found something today at their wide receivers. They have championship caliber running backs. They have 2 excellent running backs, and they have a very good secondary. Are you just going to skip Jacob's super chat? No. Thank you for pointing it out. But I am a one-man show tonight. So if I miss something, super chat or anything important, if my house is on fire, I might miss it. I haven't even peed yet. I've been going for almost 2 hours and I haven't peed yet. So, when is Auburn going to have to start vacating these wins the refs are giving them to the last? I mean, the refs tried to give them one against Penn State, and it was a loss. So, Jacob, thank you for the super chat. I didn't see the whole game today. I did see a lot of the big plays. I didn't see if the refs gave them something. I didn't see it, but look, I think there is some wild lucky voodoo thing that Auburn has a rap for in Jordan Hare. But in terms of refs, everybody thinks the team they hate. I'm not saying that you hate Auburn, but everybody thinks the team they hate gets a lot of breaks from the refs. People say that about Alabama, and it's actually the opposite for Alabama. There's something we talk about all the time. This came out a few years ago. Somebody did analysis on opponents being called for holding relative to the national average, and Alabama frequently ranks like at the bottom for opponents' penalties against. So they're the most talented team in the country. And y'all say they play a terrible schedule of nobodies, but these nobodies are going up against Alabama and never holding, never getting penalized, having the least mistakes made ever. And then y'all want to say Alabama gets a break from the ref. It's because you remember the one fluky play where there was a bad call, and you forget the ones that didn't go in their favor, maybe. I'm doing an awesome job. Take 2 minutes to water the plants. I'm okay. I'm all right. Actually, somebody came up to me last night. I was out at a bar with a buddy of mine, and somebody came up and recognized me from the show. And I already had to go to the bathroom when he came up, but we ended up talking for like half an hour about college football. And by the end of it, I was like, I'm sorry, this is rude, but I got to go. But I'm doing all right now. Agree or disagree? This is a good question. Michigan State could easily finish as number 2 team in the Big East. I mean, it's possible. I don't like what I saw today, although we've talked about how Nebraska is actually maybe a little bit better, especially defensively, than they get credit for. I think Michigan State is another offensive limited team, but they are like Arkansas in that they have a unified, tough-nosed mindset and approach to the game that's going to win them some ball games. Please I'm going to make sure that my wife is sending me TikToks to watch. I don't have TikTok, but my wife and my dad frequently send me ones to look at. She knows I'm doing a live show, so I don't know what that's about. Let's see. Please make a video describing your ideal scheme. That is an interesting one. Like we might should do that both offensively and defensively. Obviously, it's relative to what you're facing, but that'd be a good one. Came into the Auburn game in the last minute 40. They still losing. Came back. I'm a Bama fan, but also an SEC fan, so I was glad to see Auburn win and pull Knicks. I don't know, Metcalf. I don't know that I knew that you were a Bama fan. Maybe I'm not been paying attention. I am switching over. I'm gonna hang out for a little bit longer, long enough to get a little bit of the rare breed. It shows you that I don't drink that much because I was drinking this on the show last week, and you can see how much it is in there. Pause for the awkward changeover to put some ice in a glass, and then I'll keep talking. Y'all can make fun of me for putting a little bit of ice in there for my brown party liquor. It's maybe too much ice, but I'm going to do it because I like a little bit of ice. All right, let's get back to it. Y'all let me know. Y'all let me know in the chat. Everybody's talking about this is like 2007. Would you like it if it was like this every year, or is this for you like a fun removal from what you'd rather have with a little less crazy? Let's see. We all know that Daniel's a big fan of 3 yards in a cloud of dust in Madison. Oh man, I've been very vocal on Twitter. And yes, I will take credit for the tweet today that said Wisconsin's play sheet is a stone tablet. I'm mad for Wisconsin fans because I think they deserve better than the abject lack of creativity or anything in that offense. This is coming off a bye week. Y'all got to remember, Wisconsin had a bye week last week, and this was the offensive game plan they had for a Notre Dame team that gave up like 29 to Toledo. It's just completely inexcusable. Everybody seems to be loving the crazy in this year. I think it only pays off. It only pays off maybe if Alabama doesn't win the national championship, because if we have all of this crazy, but Alabama still beats somebody 42-10 in the national championship game, it takes some of the fun out of it. But it will be interesting to see Clemson play in the Citrus Bowl this year, right? Did we talk about the Texas game yet? We did. I talked about how I took a little victory lap because I said in the comments on another one of our videos this week that Texas was going to murder Tech, and that you shouldn't read too much, good or bad, into that. Good in that they took care of business against an inferior team, but don't read too much good into it because Texas Tech is abnormally bad this year. Georgia Tech is looking better. Like even in their close loss to Clemson, like I give credit for close losses against talented teams. And maybe that's bad of me, but I do it. Citrus, more like Gator at this point. I was trying to be funny and cut them a little bit, but maybe it is Gator. A&M over Texas. A&M Arca game was competitive despite the terrible offense. Texas got blown out. I'm not doing one transitive property, no. I think right now Texas would probably beat A&M. You have to remember matchups matter. Matchups this is why an LSU would like almost beat an Alabama or beat Alabama and then lose to Arkansas the next week. Like matchups matter. Who am I taking, Texas or Oklahoma? Right now I'm taking Texas. If they played today, based on what I've seen, I would take Texas, although I wonder how much of Casey Thompson has been competition that he's faced, the talent level he's faced, and because that's another one who didn't win the starting job in fall camp. So 2017 was one of the craziest years since 2010, and Alabama still won the national championship. It was. 2017 was crazy. It wasn't 2007 crazy, and it wasn't this year crazy. I mean, we still had Oklahoma, Clemson, Georgia, and Alabama in the playoffs. So it wasn't that crazy. 2007 is what everybody's comparing this to, and it feels like that. I mean, I think we were, and Josh Pate talked about this, I think we were super close to having like West Virginia and Missouri in the national championship game. No, I do not think Urban Meyer should take the USC job. I think Urban Meyer should retire. I did not like the Jaguars hiring him. His thing that he was really good at his whole career is identifying in his next move where he could go and add a lot of value in an area that could be a quick turnaround thing because they were in a division or a conference that wasn't that good. And so he came into the SEC East and did a lot with Florida when the SEC East and the SEC in general was pretty down. And then when it started getting tough, he moved on and he took and this is to his credit, he took what he was good at and did it at Ohio State. You can't do that in the NFL, and you can't do that at a place where you would probably have a recruiting disadvantage nationally. Like USC could build their brand back to a recruiting powerhouse, but it would take a while, and I don't think he's got – there's a joke in there that he doesn't have the heart for it, so I'm going to say he doesn't have the stomach for it. How about that? Because that's a hackneyed joke at this point. Here's a small super chat you asked for. Yeah, that's more like it. One, because I feel like if you do a huge super chat and then I don't have a good answer for it, I feel real bad about it. One great this year may give us some wacky bowl combos. That's the thing that I think is going to be awesome about this year. And I made the joke about Clemson in the Citrus Bowl, but I kind of mean it. Like, wouldn't it Clemson versus Ole Miss be cool? It won't be Ole Miss, but like whoever they play, wouldn't that be fun to see that? Wouldn't it be fun to see some of these traditional names having to play in non-playoff? Like what if Ole Miss beats Alabama next week, doesn't lose the West, ends up in the playoffs and Alabama doesn't, and we've got Alabama finally not playing in the playoffs, but having a kind of a fun matchup. Like Alabama played Michigan a couple of years ago, and it was a cool thing to see them play. I think the bowl matchups might be a lot of fun, which leads me to I hope that we don't have a lot of opt-outs because I love bowl season. I like bowls more than I like playoffs. Let's see. Yeah, here's Jacob with a great point. And following up on that, 2007 was the year that Kansas and Missouri decided who played in the national championship. Doesn't get crazier than that. I mean, it doesn't. It doesn't. Who has a more talented roster? Let's see. It keeps jumping around. I'm having a hard time with it. I'm having a hard time getting it on the screen. Here we go. Timmy, who has the more talented roster? Bama, Georgia, Clemson, or the Citadel? The answer is probably Georgia. Probably Georgia has the more talented roster at this moment because of just how much Alabama lost last year, but we'll see. Urban Meyer won a national championship after beating Saban on the path to the title game. Yeah, he built up that team because in his region, he wasn't competing with anybody else. Like the Big Ten was not good when he got there. Ohio State went, when they were on probation, they went 12-0 and didn't play a ranked team. How do you do that? How do you do that in Power 5? Like it didn't play. And then the next year, I think the first ranked team they played was the second week of November. He had a built-in thing that he still had to make good. He still had to build up, but he saw an opportunity, and he took advantage of it. I will say that 2014 Alabama team he beat was not very good. That was a Blake Sims quarterback team. They weren't that great. Urban Meyer also was the king of having a super talented roster and laying an egg and not even making the playoffs. Like 2015, 2017, 2018. These are talented, super talented rosters that were out getting blown out by Iowa and unranked Purdue and like I've actually got some issues with Urban Meyer. He had no business losing in 2015, losing to Michigan State's backup quarterback. Like no business, but he did, because they weren't giving the ball to Ezekiel Elliott enough. Let's see. I was just saying in 2017, we were so close to seeing Auburn, Alabama, Miami, and Wisconsin. That would have been wild. Yep. I actually think Georgia beating Auburn is what put Alabama in the playoffs. Why? I actually have a good question. Why are offenses so bad, defense is so good this year? We talked about this in a previous live show. It's tough to know exactly. I do think that some of the NFL defensive concepts, because when the Eagles took the RPO spread from the college game and really leaned into it, same thing with the Rams. They were, Eagles won a Super Bowl. The Rams were really competitive. And then the NFL, like it wrecked the NFL for like 2 seasons. And then they figured some stuff out. And I think some of that has trickled down in college football schematically. And I also think super senior, this is the most experienced season of college football in terms of player experience we've ever seen. And I think it has just had a big impact. But I also think it's some bad offense. Like, let's give defenses their credit. But if y'all watched Penn State, Wisconsin, if y'all watched Notre Dame and Wisconsin, Wisconsin is a common thread. If you watched Auburn play offense today, it's not just good defenses. It's not. Like, it is a lot of bad offense. Mertz takes 6.5 minutes to read a defense after the ball is snapped, which you can imagine. If it takes you 6.5 minutes, you're probably going to get sacked a lot. The processing of things is so slow. Same thing with Calzada at A&M. Things are happening so slow, and I just think that in general, we have seen 2 or 3 really good classes of quarterback come through, and it's depleted really the quarterback position a lot in the SEC too. Like if you think about, like, it's fortunate for Alabama that Bryce Young is having a good year, but how many great quarterbacks are there in the SEC? Like Matt Corral, Bryce Young, and probably JT Daniels. I don't think he's great. I think he's good. Emory Jones might turn out to be okay in that scheme. He's not an elite NFL quarterback prospect, in my opinion. Around the country, kid at Fresno's good. The Rattler's not that great. Like, I think we've had a regression in quarterback play. Super chat from Killtack. College football to switch how soccer leagues work. We have talked about this in the past, how relegation would actually be good for college football. College football does not need D1 football. FBS does not need 130 teams. They don't. They really don't. In any given year, there should be a 50 to 60 team pool of teams that haven't been relegated to play elsewhere. And it's not just Power 5, because like Kansas is not as good as Cincinnati, right? So even though they're in the Big 12, like and Cincinnati's a G5, Cincinnati's a better program. But it was like we saw with UCF, you can go from 0-12 to really good in a few years and then fall back really fast. Whereas some other programs are more stable, you might come and go, and I think relegation could work. I think that's like we've said that for a while, and you're right. We totally agree there. Isaac, if you had to put money on which team between Oklahoma and Ohio State can turn around their play this season, who would you pick? It's a good question. It's a really good question. I would probably say Oklahoma because I like them at defensive coordinator better. I have no confidence in Kerry Coombs to be able to build a plane while flying it. That defense has core fundamental problems, and I don't think they're going to get fixed this season, and then I don't think they're going to get fixed from him. Even if Stroud or whomever they have at quarterback rounds into form and that offense becomes what it can be, I'm so worried about that defense. And I think Oklahoma's defense is actually already pretty good, which means to me, all they got to do is really get Rattler going, and I think they could be okay. The best teams are the ones that have crazy athletic funding. It's all about who can spend more to win. Well, what we're going to see is not athletic funding in terms of administration buy-in and booster network, but really how with NIL, it's going to be just which rogue boosters are willing to spend to buy players. And that's why we have said for this whole time that they need a clearinghouse because it makes it a lot harder to buy a player. If it were just about money, then Vanderbilt and Northwestern and Stanford would have the best, and Notre Dame would have the best teams in college football. Texas A&M, Texas, best teams in college football because they have the most money. Vanderbilt has the biggest endowment of any team in the SEC, but they're not spending money, and their boosters don't care about football. They're more likely to buy NIL by a basketball or baseball player. So it's a combination of rabid fan base and large fan base and boosters that are willing to spend to buy players in the modern era. And I hate it. I hate it so much. And like a lot of Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, Oklahoma, Ohio State fans that have been there in the playoffs and at the top would say they hate it too because you can see it's bad for the sport. You can just feel it. And I'm going on 2 hours. I've got about 10 minutes left in me. I'm going to try to finish this and finish a few questions. So y'all bring them in. Let's figure out what we want to talk about for 10 minutes. And then I'm going to go to sleep. This is all, it feels like this could be a chaotic year in general. It's already a chaotic year. We're obviously going to do a preview on Arkansas. There's a question about, do I think Arkansas has a legitimate chance to beat Georgia? Look, we're going to do a preview. Obviously, that's a huge game. The matchups don't favor Arkansas in a lot of ways where they did with Texas, where Arkansas could just manhandle them on the lines. But I think you beat Georgia this year with a vertical passing game. But I also think there's an opportunity, and this is where I think Florida might have a better chance than Arkansas, with a quarterback running game that might be able to claw some points back against that Georgia defense. The problem is you also got to keep Georgia from scoring, which is another issue altogether. Texas and USC have crazy money and they're not good. So USC is another organization that has a large endowment, but they don't. Texas spends money on athletics. USC does not. That's been a huge point of contention with the admin and the coaching staff and everything at USC is USC has not been investing in the football program or in sports in general. and it's caused them to fall behind. Oregon is spending way more money on athletics than USC, and USC has more money. So, yes, Oregon has Phil Knight, but USC as an organization, if you think of them as a corporation, has more money. I think they have a bigger endowment. They have more money. But those boosters and that administration is not supporting athletics the way a Texas is. But even with Texas being able to support pre-NIL, really, unless you're just bagman like crazy cheating, then you can put that into facilities and you can put that into coaching staffs and all of that. With NIL, it's who has the biggest booster network that's willing to give somebody $1 million to do a car commercial, like a used car lot commercial, right? That's what it's about. So, again, Vanderbilt has the most money in the SEC, full stop, and they're the worst team in the SEC. So it's not just about the school's money. It's about how much buy-in they have with athletics. Who wins the Big 12 right now? I'd say Oklahoma, but it's probably the most interesting one right now in terms of being up in the air. Edward is in the house. He always comes in late, which tells me he must like the late Saturday night slate of games. But glad to have you here, Edward. How many previews can we expect this week? This is a monster week. I would like to get 4. This is tough. Like, we're going to record all of them tomorrow night after me doing a 2-hour show, and I made a bunch of people, so I have to keep up with them too. And we have day jobs, so we can't churn out all the ones that we want to do. We're probably also going to have. I mean, we got to do a top 10. We may not do a game review this week. And we might just go straight into previews. I'm hoping we can get 4. I don't know when Josh is getting back from his travels, if he'll have time to record 4, but I'm hoping we can get 4, maybe 5. Maybe we just do like a model only. Here's a good question, because I have been very critical of Ryan Day's willingness to stick with Kerry Coombs this year. Who would be your dream Ohio State defensive coordinator offer? Dream offer right now for what offenses are doing is probably Barry Odom at Arkansas. So I like Barry Odom. I like Elko. I don't love Venables that much because I think that if he wants a head coaching job, he's going to walk and get one. I think Barry Odom might want to be a coordinator for a while. And I think he's a good one. So that's probably the route I would take. Like, I think he's that good. Are we going to do a top 10 video this week? I hope so. Yes. Top 10 videos are the most fun video. Like, the previews are great, but we have to be kind of formulaic with those. Like, talk about both teams, talk about the model, do our picks. The top 10 is when we really get to talk about what we've seen on Saturday and how we feel about these teams. And it's our number one opportunity to piss off the widest band of people, because nobody likes how we do top 10s. They're so conditioned to think about how AP does them, how coaches polls do them, where they start with a preseason poll, and each week they try to work from that preseason poll. And if you win, you stay or move up. If you lose, you move down. And we shuffle a lot more week to week, and people aren't conditioned to think that way, so it pisses a lot of people off, and we kind of like it. Let's see. I got a few more questions, and I got to go to bed. How much does Notre Dame need to beat Cincinnati to get the respect from us? Notre Dame, we are so much higher on Notre Dame every year and defend them every year more than people realize. We are just honest about Notre Dame. I think we did a top 10 coaches thing. I think I had Brian Kelly in my top 3 coaches. There's a difference in being an actual like elite plus team that warrants a playoff slot versus being a pretty good team. And I think Notre Dame is a pretty good team. I don't think they're a great team. I think that Wisconsin has one of the worst offenses in college football that played out today. Like, that doesn't mean I don't like Notre Dame. I'm just like, we're never wrong about them. Like, we might miss a pick on them, but as a whole, as a team, we're never wrong about them. So I'm going to stick to my guns until I'm proven wrong, until they win a playoff game. Good night, Adam. I think I missed a super chat. I did miss one from Edward, actually. OSU played late, looked good. Akron, figuring out who can play will be interesting. So we talked about this earlier, Edward. It's hard to know anything from Akron. Now, it's good that they didn't go out and stumble and look ugly, but it's hard to know anything good. I do think you need these kind of games, though, especially when you're scuffling a little bit to get any kind of cohesive play together and any kind of momentum. I think these kinds of games are actually hugely important. Let's see. I'm going to do like one more question. One more, and then I got to go. Do you see A&M hanging in with Alabama when they play? No, not right now. Not with that offense. They might give Alabama some struggles with their offense because A&M's got a good defense, but that offense is so bad it's going to give Alabama a lot of possessions, which over time is just going to be a war of attrition, and Alabama will put up 35, 40 points just because they're going to get so many opportunities from midfield because A&M went 3-0. Timmy said, you said you give credit to teams for playing elite teams close. We played Coastal Carolina and only lost 52-14. We deserve a little credit. You deserve little credit. Correct. There's a lot of arguing about Notre Dame and Alabama in the chat. Notre Dame does, in the NIL world, I think NIL is going to help Notre Dame more than it's going to hurt them because they have a large endowment, and people keep making jokes about endowment in the comments, but they have a large endowment and an obsessive booster network that's willing to pay within the framework where they previously may not have been willing to just be straight up bagmen. There's a ton of money flowing through Notre Dame for athletics. I think they are one of the big beneficiaries of this. All right, y'all. That is it for me. Y'all can continue to argue about recruiting in the chat if you want to. Just want to say absolutely just thank y'all so much. This is really hard for me to carry this for over 2 hours by myself without Josh. Shows you just how much Josh actually means to the show because I can bounce so many things off of him. But thank y'all so much for engaging in the chat and being here for it. It made me feel great to have y'all here, even though you knew I was doing it all by myself. I'm loving the crazy year this year. Look out for our previews this week. They'll start dropping on Monday with our top 10. Thanks so much, y'all. Have a great week. God bless.